In the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, a young boy named Alex was about to experience something that would change his life forever. At just 16 years old, Alex had always been curious about the world beyond his hometown. His father, a hard-working man who had climbed from modest beginnings to become one of the most respected leaders in the airline industry, wanted to give his son a gift he'd never forget. For Alex's birthday, his dad surprised him with a first-class ticket on an international flight, a chance to see the world from 35,000 feet above the ground. Alex couldn't believe it. He had heard stories about how luxurious first-class seats were, how they reclined into beds, came with personal entertainment systems, and offered meals prepared by top chefs. It wasn't just a plane ride, it felt like stepping into another world, one where everything was designed to make you feel special. The thought of sitting in such a seat made Alex beam with excitement. This was more than just a trip. It was a dream come true. On the day of the flight, Alex arrived at the airport wearing his best outfit. He carried himself with confidence as he walked through security and toward the gate. When the boarding announcement finally came over the intercom, Alex grabbed his small backpack and joined the line. As he handed his boarding pass to the friendly attendant at the entrance of the jet bridge, he noticed her smile widen when she saw the first-class label printed boldly across the paper. "Looks like someone's traveling in style today," she said warmly. Alex grinned back, feeling a mix of pride and anticipation. Walking down the narrow aisle of the massive aircraft, Alex marveled at the rows of seats. Economy class stretched far ahead, filled with people chatting quietly or settling into their spots. But near the front, things looked completely different. The first-class cabin was spacious, almost serene. There were only a handful of seats, each enclosed in its own private pod-like space. Soft lighting bathed the area in warmth, and the air smelled faintly of leather and fresh linen. Alex found his assigned seat without any trouble. It was perfect, a window seat right next to the wing, offering a breathtaking view once they took off. With a deep breath, he slid into the plush chair, sinking slightly into the cushion. Everything around him screamed luxury, from the soft blanket folded neatly beside him to the touchscreen panel embedded in the armrest. He pressed a button, experimentally, and the seat adjusted automatically, cradling him in comfort. For a while, Alex simply soaked it all in. He watched as other passengers filed past, some glancing curiously at the exclusive section before continuing to their own seats further back. A few gave polite nods, acknowledging the rarity of seeing someone so young in this part of the plane. Alex felt a quiet sense of accomplishment knowing he belonged here, not because of wealth or status, but because his father believed in giving him opportunities to grow. As the minutes ticked by, the hum of pre-flight activity filled the cabin. Attendants bustled around, ensuring everyone was settled and comfortable. Outside, ground crew members scurried about, preparing the aircraft for departure. Through the window, Alex could see fuel trucks pulling away and luggage carts being loaded onto conveyor belts. Every detail fascinated him, making the reality of flying even more magical. But then, something shifted. Just as the last passengers were taking their seats, a tall man in a sharp suit appeared near the entrance of the first-class cabin. He scanned the area briefly before approaching Alex's row. For a moment, Alex thought nothing of it. Perhaps the man was looking for his own seat. But when the stranger stopped directly in front of him, accompanied by a nervous-looking flight attendant, Alex realized this interaction might not be ordinary. The man glanced down at Alex, his expression unreadable. Then, turning slightly to address the attendant, he said, "There seems to be a mistake. This is my seat." His tone was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. Confused, Alex pulled out his boarding pass again, checking the seat number carefully. It matched exactly what was printed on the paper, row 2, seat A. There was no error on his end. The flight dazzled Alex with promises of adventure, yet beneath its shimmering surface lay an unforeseen storm waiting to unfold. Little did he know, this seemingly routine journey would soon spiral into a pivotal moment, not just for him, but for countless others watching closely from afar. The man in the sharp suit stood there, his arms crossed and his jaw set firmly. He looked down at Alex with an expression that was hard to read, part frustration, part impatience. The flight attendant beside him shifted uncomfortably, clearly, uneasy about the situation unfolding in front of her. She glanced between Alex and the man, trying to find a way to diffuse the tension. "Sir," she began hesitantly, her voice soft but strained. "I've double-checked the seating chart. This is indeed the young passenger's seat." Her words were polite, but they carried a hint of apology, as if she already knew how this might end. The man didn't seem satisfied. He let out a short, dismissive laugh and shook his head. "Are you telling me that this child gets priority over me?" he asked, his tone dripping with disbelief. His eyes darted back to Alex, lingering for a moment before returning to the flight attendant. "These seats aren't just handed out randomly. They're reserved for people who understand their value." Alex felt his stomach drop. He wasn't sure what was happening, but the man's words stung. It wasn't just the tone, it was the implication behind them. The man wasn't questioning whether Alex had the right ticket. He was questioning whether Alex deserved to be here at all. And while the man didn't explicitly say it, the meaning was clear. Someone like Alex didn't belong in first class. The flight attendant tried again, her voice trembling slightly. "Sir, I assure you the seating assignments are correct. If there's been any misunderstanding, we can certainly look into it further." "There's no misunderstanding," the man interrupted sharply. "I'm simply asking that you do your job and ensure proper accommodations are made." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "for everyone." By now, other passengers nearby had started to take notice. A few heads turned curiously from their seats while others leaned forward to get a better view of the commotion. Some whispered among themselves, speculating about what was going on. One older woman sitting across the aisle raised an eyebrow but said nothing, while a businessman 2 rows back smirked faintly, shaking his head as if amused by the drama. Alex sat frozen, unsure of what to do or say. Part of him wanted to shrink, away, to disappear into the plush leather seat and avoid the growing spotlight. But another part, the part that remembered his dad's advice about standing up for himself, knew he couldn't let this slide without a fight. Slowly he spoke up, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "I have my boarding pass," Alex said, holding it up for everyone to see. "It says right here that this is my seat. I didn't make a mistake." The man turned, his gaze back to Alex, his lips curling into a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course you didn't," he replied, his tone condescending. "But sometimes, rules need to be adjusted for the greater good. Surely you can understand that." The phrase hit Alex like a punch to the gut. Greater good? What did that even mean? Was the man suggesting that Alex giving up his seat would somehow benefit everyone else? Or was this just a fancy way of saying that Alex wasn't good enough to stay where he was? Before Alex could respond, the flight attendant stepped in once more, her attempts at diplomacy faltering under the weight of the situation. "Young man," she said, turning to Alex this time, "would you mind moving to economy class? We'll make sure you're comfortable there and we can offer you complimentary snacks and drinks during the flight." Alex stared at her, incredulous. Move to economy? After everything he'd been through to get here? This wasn't just about the seat anymore. It was about being treated fairly. It was about not letting someone else decide where he belonged, based on assumptions and biases. "No," Alex said firmly, surprising even himself with how strong his voice sounded. "This is my seat. I'm not moving unless someone can tell me why I should." The man scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes as if Alex's refusal was both ridiculous and expected. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath. Then louder, he added, "Fine. If this is how it's going to be, then I suppose I'll have to escalate the matter." At that point, the atmosphere in the cabin grew tense. Passengers exchanged glances, some nodding approvingly at Alex's resolve, while others seemed uncomfortable with the confrontation. The flight attendant looked increasingly flusterflyers around him, watching and waiting to see what would happen next. The standoff continued for several minutes, each side refusing to budge. The man in the suit kept insisting that Alex didn't deserve the seat, while Alex clung to the truth. His ticket was valid and he had every right to stay. Meanwhile, the flight crew scrambled to figure out how to resolve the issue without causing further disruption. Finally, the pilot emerged from the cockpit, his presence commanding attention. He introduced himself and listened carefully as both sides explained their perspectives. When it was Alex's turn to speak, he held up his boarding pass again, his hand steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. The pilot nodded thoughtfully, then addressed the man in the suit. "Sir, according to our records, this seat belongs to the young man. Unless there's evidence otherwise, we must honor the original assignment." The man's face turned red with anger, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he muttered something under his breath and stormed off to find another seat. The tension in the cabin eased slightly, though the incident left a lingering unease among the passengers. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Alex sank back into his seat, his heart still racing. He had stood his ground, but the encounter left him shaken. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that would ripple far beyond the confines of the aircraft. As the plane roared down the runway and lifted into the sky, Alex tried to focus on the breathtaking view outside his window. The city below shrank into a patchwork of tiny buildings and winding roads, while fluffy clouds stretched endlessly across the horizon. It was the kind of scene that usually filled him with wonder, but today it barely registered. His mind kept replaying the confrontation in vivid detail. The man's dismissive tone, the flight attendant's nervous glances, the whispers from other passengers. Every time he closed his eyes, he could still feel the weight of being singled out. For a while, Alex sat silently, pretending to watch a movie on the screen in front of him. But his heart wasn't in it. He couldn't shake the feeling that something about this moment was bigger than just him. This wasn't the first time. Someone had treated him differently because of the color of his skin, but it had never happened so publicly, or so unfairly. He felt a mix of emotions swirling inside, anger at the injustice, frustration at not knowing how to fix it, and even a little pride for standing his ground when it would have been easier to give in. Finally, unable to sit quietly any longer, Alex reached into his backpack and pulled out his phone. He hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen. Who could he talk to about this? His friends might understand, but they weren't the ones who could really help. Then it hit him. His dad. His dad always knew what to do. With trembling fingers, Alex dialed the number. The call connected after just 2 rings. "Hey, kiddo," came his father's deep, reassuring voice. "How's the flight going?" Alex swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "Dad," he began, his voice cracking slightly. Something happened. His dad immediately picked up on the seriousness in Alex's tone. "What is it? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Alex replied quickly, not wanting to worry him too much. "But there was this guy on the plane. He said I didn't belong in my seat because well, you know." He paused, unsure how to finish the sentence. "And then the flight attendant asked me to move to economy even though I have a valid ticket. They made it sound like it was no big deal, but it felt wrong, like I wasn't good enough." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Alex could almost picture his dad sitting back in his chair, his expression shifting from concern to something darker. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Tell me everything," he said. "Don't leave anything out." So, Alex did. He recounted every detail, the man's condescending remarks, the flight attendant's awkward attempts to mediate, the way the other passengers had watched silently as the drama unfolded. As he spoke, he felt a strange sense of relief, as if sharing the story somehow lessened its sting. By the time he finished, tears were streaming down his face, though he tried to hide them by keeping his voice low. When Alex stopped talking, his dad exhaled slowly. "Listen to me," he said, his tone steady and unwavering. "You did nothing wrong. You followed the rules, and you stood up for yourself. That takes courage. I'm proud of you." Those words meant more to Alex than he could put into words. For a moment, he let himself believe that maybe things would be okay after all. But his dad wasn't done yet. "This isn't just about you," his father continued. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through what you're going through right now. Let me handle this." Alex nodded even though his dad couldn't see him. "Okay," he whispered. "Thanks, Dad." "Stay strong," his dad said before ending the call. "I'll take care of it." Back home, Alex's dad wasted no time. As soon as the call ended, he grabbed his laptop and opened a video conference with the airline's head of operations. Within minutes, executives were scrambling to respond to his urgent request for an update on the situation aboard the flight. His instructions were clear and direct. Ground the plane as soon as it landed and suspend everyone involved, including the captain, pending a full investigation. Word spread quickly through the company. Employees whispered nervously in break rooms and huddled around computer screens, watching emails flood in with updates. Some admired the CEO's boldness, while others worried about the potential fallout. No one could deny, however, that this was a defining moment, not just for the airline, but for the industry as a whole. Meanwhile, passengers on the plane began noticing subtle changes in the crew's behavior. Attendants exchanged hushed conversations near the galley, their faces tense and distracted. Even the pilot seemed unusually serious during his mid-flight announcements. Rumors circulated among the travelers, each version more dramatic than the last. One woman claimed she overheard someone mention legal action, while another speculated that the entire crew might lose their jobs. Whatever the truth was, it was clear that something major was brewing. When the plane finally touched down at its destination, the mood was electric. Passengers disembarked slowly, many stopping to glance curiously at Alex as they passed. A group of reporters waited just beyond the gate, cameras rolling and microphones ready. Someone had tipped them off about the incident, and now the world was watching. As Alex stepped off the plane, he felt a wave of conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was relieved to be on solid ground again, away from the stares and whispers. On the other hand, he knew this was far from over. Reporters shouted questions at him, but he kept his head down, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. All he wanted was to get home, to crawl into bed and pretend none of this had ever happened. But deep down, he knew that wasn't possible. This wasn't just his story anymore. It belonged to everyone who had witnessed it, shared it, or heard about it online. Hashtags like Talk First Class Justice and Stand Against Bias trended on social media platforms, drawing attention from millions of people around the globe. Videos of the confrontation surfaced, sparking heated debates about privilege, discrimination, and accountability. At home, Alex's dad monitored the growing storm with a mixture of satisfaction and determination. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew this was a chance to make real change, not just within the airline, but in the broader conversation about equality and respect. And as he prepared to address the public in a formal statement, he thought about his son, sitting alone in his room, processing everything that had happened. "You've already made a difference," he murmured to himself, his voice filled with quiet pride. "Now let's show the world what we're made of." The morning after the flight, the story had exploded. News outlets across the country, and even internationally, were buzzing with headlines about what had happened on that plane. Social media was ablaze, with videos and posts being shared by millions of people. Some praised Alex for standing his ground, while others criticized the airline for allowing such an incident to occur in the first place. The hashtag Talk First Class Justice trended worldwide, sparking conversations about fairness, discrimination, and accountability. In the midst of this whirlwind, Alex's father made a decision that would send shockwaves through the industry. He called an emergency press conference, stepping into the spotlight not just as a CEO, but as a father determined to protect his child and to set an example for the world. Cameras flashed as he walked onto the stage, his expression calm but resolute. Behind him hung the company logo, a reminder of the responsibility he carried not only to his passengers, but to his employees as well. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady and commanding yet filled with emotion. "Yesterday, my son boarded one of our flights expecting nothing more than a safe and comfortable journey. Instead, he faced something no person should ever have to endure: discrimination disguised as policy. The room fell silent. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised, cameras rolling. This wasn't going to be just another corporate apology. It was personal. "What happened on that plane does not reflect the values of this company," he continued. "We pride ourselves on treating every passenger with dignity and respect, regardless of their age, race, or background. But clearly we failed. And when you fail, you must take action." He paused, letting his words sink in before delivering the bombshell. "Effective immediately, the entire crew involved in yesterday's incident, including the captain, has been terminated. Their actions were unacceptable and they will not represent this airline moving forward." Gasps rippled through the audience. Termination for everyone? It was a bold move, one that some might call extreme. But Alex's dad didn't stop there. "We are also launching a full investigation into how this situation was allowed to escalate," he added. "Every employee, from ground staff to senior management, will undergo mandatory training on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We cannot claim to serve a global community if we do not understand and respect the diversity within it." As he spoke, his tone softened slightly, becoming more reflective. "This is not just about punishing those who made mistakes. It's about learning from them. It's about ensuring that no one else has to experience what my son went through. Discrimination has no place in our skies or anywhere else." The speech ended with applause, though it was mixed with murmurs of skepticism. Some reporters shouted follow-up questions, probing whether the firings were too harsh or if the measures announced would actually lead to meaningful change. Others questioned whether the CEO was acting out of bias himself, given his personal connection to the case. But despite the criticism, one thing was clear: the airline and its leader had taken a stand. Meanwhile, public reaction was divided. Supporters flooded social media with messages of solidarity, praising Alex's courage and his father's decisive leadership. Finally, "Someone holding people accountable," read one viral tweet. Another commenter wrote, "If this doesn't wake up other companies, I don't know what will." But not everyone agreed. Critics argued that firing the entire crew was excessive and could set a dangerous precedent. "What about due process?" asked one op-ed writer. "Shouldn't we hear both sides before ruining careers?" Others accused the CEO of using his power to exact revenge, claiming the punishment didn't fit the crime. For Alex, watching all of this unfold was overwhelming. At first, he felt a surge of gratitude toward his dad for taking such a strong stance. Knowing that his father had his back gave him a sense of security he desperately needed. But as the days passed, the constant attention started to wear on him. Strangers approached him at school, asking for details about the incident. Friends texted him links to articles and memes, some supportive, others mocking. Even walking down the street felt different. He couldn't shake the feeling that people were staring, whispering, judging. One evening, sitting alone in his room, Alex scrolled through his phone, reading comment after comment online. Some were kind, calling him brave and inspiring. Others were cruel, accusing him of exaggerating the situation or seeking attention. One particularly hurtful message stood out. "Why didn't you just move seats? It's not that big a deal." Alex stared at the screen, his chest tightening. Was it really that simple? Should he have just given up his seat and avoided all this chaos? For a moment, doubt crept in, making him question whether he'd done the right thing. Maybe he should have stayed quiet, kept his head down and let the man have the seat. After all, wasn't avoiding trouble easier than fighting for justice? But then he remembered his dad's words during their phone call. "You did nothing wrong." Those 4 words echoed in his mind, grounding him. He hadn't done anything wrong. He had followed the rules, held onto his ticket, and refused to let someone else decide where he belonged. That wasn't selfish or unreasonable, it was fair. Slowly, Alex closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He realized that standing up for himself wasn't just about the seat. It was about proving that he mattered, that his voice deserved to be heard. Back at the airline headquarters, executives scrambled to implement the changes promised by the UKER CEO. Training sessions were scheduled, policies rewritten, and new initiatives launched to promote inclusivity. Employees attended workshops led by experts in racial sensitivity and unconscious bias, learning how to recognize and address discriminatory behavior. Managers reviewed footage from onboard cameras, analyzing interactions between staff and passengers to identify areas for improvement. At the same time, the company rolled out a massive advertising campaign aimed at rebuilding trust. Billboards featured slogans like, "Everyone belongs here" and "Fly with respect," accompanied by images of diverse passengers smiling and enjoying their journeys. Commercials aired during primetime television slots, showcasing stories of families reuniting, friends exploring new destinations, and individuals overcoming challenges, all underscored by a message of unity and acceptance. Despite these efforts, the road to recovery wasn't smooth. Passengers filed complaints about delays caused by additional screenings and checks implemented in response to the controversy. Former employees spoke out against the firings, arguing that they had been scapegoated for systemic issues beyond their control. Legal battles loomed on the horizon as some crew members threatened lawsuits, claiming wrongful termination. Through it all, Alex's dad remained steadfast. He knew the decisions he'd made wouldn't please everyone, but he believed they were necessary. In private meetings with his team, he emphasized the importance of staying true to the company's core values. "Change isn't easy," he told them, "but if we want to be better, we have to be willing to face the hard truths. We owe it to our passengers and to ourselves." For Alex, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The initial frenzy of media coverage died down, replaced by quieter reflections on what had happened. He started seeing a counselor recommended by his dad, someone who specialized in helping young people navigate trauma and self-doubt. During their sessions, Alex talked openly about his feelings, the anger, the fear, the moments of doubt, and slowly began to heal. One day, as he sat in the counselor's office, she asked him a question that caught him off guard. "Do you think this experience changed you?" Alex thought for a moment before answering. "Yeah," he said finally. "It made me realize that standing up for yourself isn't always easy. Sometimes it feels like the whole world is against you. But if you don't fight for what's right, who will?" His counselor smiled. "That's a powerful lesson to learn at your age. Remember, courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when you are." As Alex left the session that day, he felt a glimmer of hope. The scars from the incident would always be there, but so would the strength he discovered within himself. And maybe, just maybe, his story could inspire others to find their own courage too. Weeks turned into months, and life began to settle into a new rhythm for Alex. The whirlwind of media attention had died down, but its impact lingered like ripples in a pond. Every now and then, he'd catch glimpses of his story resurfacing online. A new article analyzing the fallout, a podcast episode debating the ethics of firing the flight crew, or even strangers recognizing him at the mall. At first, it unnerved him. He didn't ask for this kind of spotlight, and the weight of being seen as a symbol of resilience was heavy. But over time, he learned to carry it differently, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. Alex's dad played a big role in helping him navigate these uncharted waters. After the initial press conference, he made it clear that while the company would handle the public-facing aspects of the situation, their family needed to focus on healing privately. "This isn't just about making headlines," he told Alex one evening during dinner. "It's about how we move forward as people. You've already shown incredible strength. Now it's time to figure out what comes next. For you, for us, and for everyone watching." Those words stuck with Alex. They reminded him that this wasn't just his story anymore. It belonged to countless others who saw themselves in him. Parents shared videos of their kids talking about standing up for what's right. Teachers used the incident as a lesson in classrooms, sparking discussions about fairness and equality. Community leaders invited Alex to speak at events, hoping his voice could inspire change. At first, he hesitated. Public speaking terrified him. What if he said the wrong thing? What if people judged him? But his dad encouraged him to take small steps, reminding him that he didn't need to have all the answers. Sometimes simply sharing your truth was enough. One Saturday morning, Alex found himself sitting in a community center auditorium, surrounded by rows of chairs filled with curious faces. The event was called Voices of Tomorrow, and it brought together young people from different backgrounds to share their experiences and ideas for creating a better future. When the host introduced Alex, the room erupted in applause. For a moment, he froze, clutching the microphone tightly as his heart raced. Then he took a deep breath and began to speak. "I never thought something like this would happen to me," he started, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside. "I just wanted to enjoy my birthday trip, to see the world from 35,000 feet above the ground. But instead, I ended up seeing something else. The way some people still think they're better than others because of things like race or age." He paused, glancing around the room. Some listeners nodded knowingly while others leaned forward, hanging on his every word. "That day on the plane, I felt small. I felt like I didn't belong. But then I realized something. No one gets to decide where you belong except you. Standing up for myself wasn't easy, but it taught me that my voice matters. And maybe, just maybe, my story can remind other people that their voices matter too." When he finished, the audience stood and cheered, many wiping away tears. It wasn't a perfect speech. He stumbled over a few words and forgot parts of what he planned to say. But it didn't matter. People connected with his honesty, his vulnerability. That night, as he scrolled through social media, he saw dozens of messages thanking him for sharing his story. One comment stood out. "You reminded me that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about doing the right thing even when you're scared." While Alex worked on finding his footing again, the airline continued its efforts to rebuild trust with passengers and employees alike. Training programs rolled out across the company, focusing not only on diversity and inclusion but also on empathy and active listening. Flight attendants practiced de-escalation techniques, learning how to handle conflicts without letting biases cloud their judgment. Managers held regular meetings with staff, encouraging open dialogue about challenges and concerns. Slowly but surely, a culture shift began to take root. But change wasn't without its growing pains. Some longtime employees struggled to adapt to the new policies, feeling frustrated by what they perceived as unnecessary bureaucracy. Others embraced the initiatives wholeheartedly, sharing stories of how the training helped them connect more deeply with passengers. One flight attendant wrote an anonymous letter to the CEO, describing how she intervened when a passenger complained about another traveler based on their appearance. "Before I might have ignored it or tried to pacify them," she admitted. "But now I know better. I spoke up, calmly explained why their behavior wasn't acceptable, and offered support to the person affected. It felt good to do the right thing." To further solidify its commitment to progress, the airline launched a scholarship program aimed at supporting underprivileged youth interested in careers in aviation. From pilots to engineers to customer service representatives, the initiative sought to diversify the industry by providing resources and mentorship to those who might otherwise be overlooked. Alex's dad announced the program during a live stream, dedicating it to all the dreamers out there who deserve a chance to soar. The response was overwhelming. Applications poured in from teenagers eager to break barriers and rewrite narratives. Among them was a young girl from a low-income neighborhood who dreamed of becoming a pilot. In her essay, she wrote, "If someone like me can fly a plane, then maybe others will realize that anything is possible." Reading her words, Alex couldn't help but smile. Maybe, in some small way, his experience had planted a seed of hope for others. Despite the positive changes, criticism persisted. Legal battles dragged on as former crew members pursued lawsuits against the airline, arguing that their firings were unjustified. Media outlets published opinion pieces questioning whether the CEO's actions were motivated by emotion rather than logic. Even within the company, tensions simmered as some employees grumbled about favoritism or feared speaking out lest they face similar consequences. Through it all, Alex's dad remained steadfast. He knew the road to meaningful change wouldn't be smooth, but he believed the turbulence was worth it. During a meeting with senior executives, he shared a story about a conversation he'd had with Alex recently. "He asked me if I ever doubted my decision to fire the crew," he recounted. And I told him, yes, of course I did. Doubt is part of leadership. But here's the thing. Doubt doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you care. If we're going to build a company and a world that truly values everyone, we have to care enough to make tough choices. His words resonated with the team, reinforcing their shared mission. Still, the pressure weighed heavily on him. Late nights became the norm as he pored over reports, reviewed training materials, and strategized ways to improve. Friends noticed the toll it was taking, urging him to take breaks and prioritize self-care. But he shrugged them off, saying, "This isn't just work, it's personal." For Alex, watching his dad pour so much energy into fixing the problem stirred mixed emotions. On one hand, he admired his father's dedication and unwavering belief in justice. On the other hand, he worried about the strain it placed on him. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching TV, Alex finally voiced his concern. "Dad, are you okay?" he asked softly. "You seem tired." His dad chuckled, rubbing his temples. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just a lot on my plate, you know?" Alex nodded. "Do you ever regret doing all this, like maybe it's too much?" His dad looked at him, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes, yeah, I wonder if I could have handled it differently. But then I think about you and what happened. If I hadn't acted, what message would that send to you, to our employees, to the world? We can't fix everything overnight, but we can start somewhere. And if standing up for what's right makes people uncomfortable, well, maybe that's exactly what needs to happen." Alex sat quietly, absorbing his dad's words. For the first time, he understood the gravity of what they were doing, not just addressing one incident, but challenging a system that had long allowed discrimination to thrive unchecked. It was messy, complicated, and exhausting, but it was also necessary. And though the journey ahead was uncertain, Alex knew one thing for sure. They were in it together. As the credits rolled on the movie they were half watching, Alex leaned back against the couch, feeling a strange sense of peace. The scars from that day on the plane would always remain, but so would the lessons he'd learned. Courage, resilience, hope. These weren't just abstract concepts. They were tools, weapons even, for building a better future. And as long as he kept using them, he knew he'd be okay. Months had passed since the incident on the plane. And though life had settled into a new rhythm for Alex and his family, the ripple effects of that day continued to spread far beyond their immediate world. The story had become more than just a news headline. It was a catalyst for conversations about fairness, respect, and equality in ways no one could have predicted. For Alex, this realization hit him hardest during an event at a local high school. The auditorium buzzed with energy as students filed in, chatting excitedly about the guest speakers scheduled to appear. When Alex walked onto the stage, accompanied by soft applause, he felt a mix of nerves and determination. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this, but he knew why he was here: to share his truth and maybe help someone else feel less alone. "Hi, everyone," he began, gripping the microphone tightly. His voice wavered slightly, but he steadied himself. "I'm not really sure where to start, so I'll just say this. I never thought I'd be standing here talking about something like this. A few months ago, I was just a regular kid who loved planes and dreamed of seeing the world. But then something happened that changed everything." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces staring back at him. Some were curious, others skeptical, but most seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. Taking a deep breath, he recounted the events of that fateful flight: the man demanding his seat, the awkwardness of the flight attendant's request, the whispers from other passengers. As he spoke, he noticed nods of understanding and murmurs of disbelief rippling through the crowd. "But here's the thing," Alex continued, his voice growing stronger. "It wasn't just about the seat. It was about being treated like I didn't belong because of how I look. That feeling of being invisible or unimportant is something a lot of people know too well. Maybe it's happened to you. Maybe it hasn't. Either way, I want you to know that your voice matters. If something doesn't feel right, speak up. Even if it's scary, even if you're not sure anyone will listen, just try. Because sometimes one person speaking up can make all the difference." When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Students lined up afterward to ask questions or thank him for sharing his story. One girl shyly approached him, clutching a notebook filled with doodles and notes. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "I've been bullied at school for years, and hearing you talk about standing up for yourself made me feel like maybe I can do that too." Alex smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. This was why he kept telling his story, not for fame or recognition, but because it might give someone else the courage to believe in themselves. Back home, Alex's dad reflected on how much had changed, not just within the airline but within himself. Leading a company through such a public crisis had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated. There were sleepless nights spent worrying about lawsuits, angry emails from former employees, and endless debates over whether they were doing enough to address systemic issues. Yet despite the challenges, he felt proud of the progress they'd made. The diversity training programs had become a cornerstone of the airline's operations, with feedback from staff indicating real growth in understanding and empathy. Passengers reported feeling more respected and valued, and the scholarship program had already helped dozens of young people pursue careers in aviation. Every success, no matter how small, reminded him that change was possible, even if it required patience, persistence, and sacrifice. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late one evening, as he sat in his office reviewing reports, he found himself wondering if any of it truly mattered. Would these efforts create lasting change, or would they fade once the headlines moved on to something else? Just as he was about to close his laptop for the night, his phone buzzed with a text message from Alex. "Hey, Dad. Just wanted to say thanks again for everything. Love you." Those simple words brought tears to his eyes. In that moment, he realized that while the work he was doing was important, it wasn't just about policy changes or corporate initiatives. It was about people. It was about showing his son, and everyone else watching, that standing up for what's right is always worth it, even when it's hard. As time went on, Alex began to see glimpses of hope everywhere he looked. At school, teachers incorporated discussions about discrimination and allyship into their lessons, encouraging students to think critically about the world around them. On social media, hashtags like #Mowers Stand for Justice and Equality in Action gained traction, inspiring acts of kindness and solidarity. Even strangers approached him occasionally, thanking him for reminding them that they weren't alone in their struggles. One particularly memorable encounter happened at the airport. Alex and his dad were waiting for a flight when a man approached them, extending his hand. "I just wanted to shake your hand," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "Your story inspired me to have a tough conversation with my own kids about treating people fairly. Thank you for that." Alex shook the man's hand, feeling a lump rise in his throat. These moments reminded him that his experience, painful as it was, had sparked something bigger, a movement toward understanding and unity. And while the scars from that day would always remain, they served as a reminder of how far he'd come, and how much farther he still hoped to go. Looking ahead, Alex knew the journey wasn't over. Discrimination wouldn't disappear overnight, and there would always be setbacks along the way. But he also knew that every act of courage, no matter how small, planted a seed of hope. Whether it was a teenager standing up to a bully, a parent teaching their child about kindness, or a CEO rethinking company policies, each step forward mattered. On a quiet afternoon, sitting on the porch with his dad, Alex voiced a thought that had been swirling in his mind for weeks. "Do you think we'll ever get to a point where stuff like this doesn't happen anymore?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at the world beyond their yard. His dad smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Probably not anytime soon," he admitted. "But that doesn't mean we stop trying. Progress isn't perfect and it's rarely fast, but every little bit helps, and hey, look at what we've done already. Who knows what's next?" Alex nodded, letting the words sink in. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, the road ahead would be long and challenging, but as long as people kept standing up, speaking out and believing in a better future, anything was possible. And with that thought, Alex smiled, one of those rare, genuine smiles that come from knowing you've made a difference. Because in the end, it wasn't just about one seat on a plane. It was about proving that everyone has a place in this world, and that together we could build a brighter, fairer tomorrow.